What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick.
I'm Jammin John.
And we have yet another album review for you. And one that I was kind of debating about maybe not covering just because there's a little bit of controversy, and I'm going to address that, kind of early here. But I definitely wanted to check out because I like this guy's music. And, this is a one-man black metal project, so I guess you can call it a guy, but it's also a band. Either way, the band is Taake, or at least I think that's how you pronounce it. The album in question is in Norwegian. So once again, we had to board the struggle bus and try to pronounce some shit. So this one is called Et Hav av Avstand. This also comes out on the 1st of September on Dark Essence Records. This band formed in 1995 in Bergen, Norway. This is their 8th album overall. And for those that don't know, this is underground, Norwegian, one-man black metal. Very second wave, and of course with second wave, you get stuff like controversies, arrests, Norwegian black metal. Anyway, I'll get into some of these controversies. I know that the main guy behind this was arrested and released. I could not find what for, but that was many years ago. And more recently, he got in some shit because he wore a shirt with a swastika at a German festival. Man, bad taste. Now, to his credit, he is not NSBM, like he doesn't support that stuff. He wore it to generate some controversy, just because. And, well, given his statements after the fact, he realized it was a huge mistake because, you think we frown on that here in the States. They really frown on that in Germany. So he got chewed out big time. He apologized, and also this band's themes have never been tied to any of that stuff. It's just straightforward black metal, the standard tropes of darkness, the devil, and getting away from Christianity, and probably some like foresty stuff because they like that shit there too. Now, reading up on that was one of my main reasons going over this, and I really enjoy this guy's music. I have 3 of their albums. 2 of them I can't pronounce, and one of them is the self-titled, which I think that was probably the first one I got and really got me into this band's music. And on its surface, or at least back then, I would say it's more straightforward second wave black metal, though very riffy and actually very dynamic, just in terms of their older stuff. And I was curious what he was doing here recently, and we checked out this album, and definitely was loaded with some surprises that I wasn't expecting, considering I've been listening to him for a while.
Right, and I've never heard of this guy or this band or the guy in the band being the same thing. One man band. I don't know. I've never heard it. In fact, every time I see Taake, right? Every time I see that, all I can think of Thomas Hake from Meshuggah, and this is not that.
I think Toki Wartooth.
But, or Toki, or whatever. I don't know how the hell it's pronounced. I'm not Norwegian. And again, much of my story, you guys know that I was very, very late getting into the black metal game. So, I knew what I expected off the rip, just from what this was, and I got way more than that. Yeah,
honestly, I expected something more akin to the albums I have, and honestly, what we got here was very different. I mean, it still has its familiar realm to it, but first off, this is 4 tracks, but each track on here, minus 1, is over 10 minutes long, and these are very intricate, well thought out, long flowing tracks, and there's just sort of a different vibe to them. First off, the production here is a little bit lighter than it has been in the past. The guitars are still heavy. They're very gainy, very cold. It's what you expect from black metal. Drums are minimalistic, but generally with one-man black metal, you think, all right, it's bedroom black metal. It's just going to be static blast beats and tremolos.
Right. And while there were blast beats, they definitely were not the dominant force. For the most part, they were bouncy rock beats. You get some D beats.
Yeah, honestly, straightforward is kind of not this album. I mean, you have, again, cold, dissonant tremolos. The opening track, Denne Forblast Ruin av en Bro. I probably said one of those words right. Probably ruin, because that's pretty familiar.
Or bro.
Or bro. Oh,
yeah.
Dude, we say bro. Bro.
Bro.
Bro.
Bro.
Anyway, that song opens up with like cold winter wind blowing. It's sort of howling through trees or something. It's already kind of creating a good setting here. And, you know, this album definitely has a cold vibe to it, but as it goes on, it gets a bit different, but sets it up. You get some groaned vocals, and then it kind of breaks into the screams. The vocals on here are fantastic. Like, they're just good, straightforward black metal vocals. But then the riffs come in. You get some like hard strumming, some very cold, dissonant riffs. But as the song goes on, it really starts opening up, and right away, the thing that I noticed is like, there's a lot of fucking melody here.
Yeah, tons of melody, and these riffs, like, because you get tremolo when it starts, and you're like, okay, here we go. But then it opens up to more of a, like, I compared it to Mastodon-style riffs in the sense where it's not straightforward. They're more of just melodies, just all over the fretboard. It's weird.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that either. Once you get down to the bridge of this song, which this opening track is like 12 minutes long, but it's broken up into some really cool movements, and along this long instrumental bridge they have are just these clever sort of like continuous riffs where they're like little accents, pull-offs, bends, and, you know, that whole aesthetic about it, it kind of sounds a bit like current Dark Throne, where they're taking like sort of a black metal approach to like kind of classic metal, except this is played maybe a little bit faster, but you also have sort of that continuous riff barrage of a band like Spirit Possession. It's still going fast, it's still going like, you know, kind of aggressively, but it's doing that with hooks. And I have to say, lead melodies on here are a big thing. And it's not like the traditional second wave thing where generally you get like, you know, a tremolo and then you get like a tremolo harmony on top of that and maybe a tremolo sort of lead on top of that. These are like a little bit more ornate, like classic rock and classic heavy metal, occasionally thrash metal.
Black and thrash.
Yeah, and we're still talking about the first song technically, but this is kind of all over here. And I don't know, like instantly it was like, this is not what I expected at all, and I'm not really complaining because, granted, I like the older stuff that I have. I think this is sort of touching on like way more musical depth than I really thought.
And a lot of it has to do too with building tension, and it doesn't do that in a typical sense either. Like the first two songs bleed into each other.
Yeah.
There's no breaks whatsoever. It just kind of bleeds over. It's got the same tremolo setup to it, but then it breaks into, again, kind of thrashy with a D-beat swing groove, and the guitar kind of seems to warm up without losing the cold temperature of it all.
Yeah. Actually, I would say there's a lot of warmth supplied by the bass. The bass on here is decidedly very warm. It's just enough to sort of melt the frost on the guitars occasionally. But as the song goes on, you get these like big changes in style. Like the way it opens up, it's a little bit more sinister and dark. Like, okay, all right, we're getting back to kind of what I expected. But then it gets in this sort of like punky, dissonant D-beat section. But then it starts dropping into like breakdowns and grooves. And then you get this big dropout, and it comes back with quite possibly one of the catchiest riffs on the entire album. There's these cool accents to it, and it does kind of a post-metal sort of dynamic where it continuously keeps building on one moment. There's a lot of stuff in here that kind of reminded me of like a more blackened Cult of Luna, where you take kind of a basic setup, add a melody, sort of like deconstructing and reconstructing the song.
Well, and this song is especially cool with that because it's got this moment where it's got this really catchy, hooky melody, and then it switches to something completely different, but then he revisits it. So it's like it bookends every time as it changes a mode.
That is definitely something I loved on here, where you get these hard switch-offs all the time. Ultramatic Groover does a great job with that, as well as the following track, Gid Sprach V, which is notably probably the most black metal song on here. Like, it definitely has a more sinister vibe. It's more blast beat driven. The tremolos feel darker, a little bit more sinister. But there's this cool trade-off when it comes down to the more melodic sections. You have like a good melodic break, and then it breaks into a sinister sort of like blast beat driven tremolo again, and you get this swing back and forth. And honestly, the opening riff has sort of a cool dynamic to it, where it starts off very sinister, and then it has like a more bright soaring tag at the end. So you get these constant like shifts in the vibe and the tone of the album, sometimes within one riff. And I have to say, like, there are a lot of brighter melodies on here than I expected for a black metal release. This is not the most evil sounding black metal I've heard, for damn sure. Like, the vocals definitely keep it very grounded in second wave black metal. Like, it's a good steady roar. You do get, like, you know, weird spoken word, and
every now and again, like, whispers. Like, he uses his voice a lot to create more of the atmosphere. I mean, while it is heavily layered in tremolo and whatnot, like, he uses his voice to make dynamic shifts when the music doesn't necessarily present that.
But there are huge, soaring, absolutely catchy, and I would even say beautiful melodies on here. The last track, Et Hure of an Kniv, which I believe translates to a whore of a knife. It's a dirty, slutty knife that he found. Ooh, shame on you. I'm not slut-shaming the knife, don't worry. Anyway, the opening melody is honestly one of the most beautiful melodies on the entire album. It is lush, it is pretty, it's bright, it's, you know, still cold. It's like, you know, like the sun shining on a fucking freezing cold day.
It's sunny on an ice cold morning. Like, it's when the sunrise comes up and you're like, holy shit, it's still -12 out here.
A nice Norwegian summer.
But it's bright.
And honestly, this is a part in the album where I think you could almost argue like there's a little bit of black gaze on there, like blackened shoegaze. It kind of lays on these big strum melodies, but man, the guitar layering in these huge, you know, epic, beautiful melodies in the beginning, it's really lavish. And honestly, for a moment, I kind of forgot that this was a one-man project, because it sounds like just a room full of people supplying melodies to, like, all right, we have a nice, you know, solid melody to back it up, and then these cool, clean kind of lead melodies. It's really cool, and then it shifts over to like a more, you know, biting verse section, and then back to these melodies. But this is probably one of the most grand songs in the entire album. There are tons of dynamic shifts on it.
And it's 13 minutes long, so I mean, you want to do that. But I like how this song kind of works in movements. Like, you get this again soaring, triumphant melody, which you don't think would be a thing. And then it gets a little darker with this tremolo section, and then it cuts out, and then you get a bass groove and this cool, like, rock drum beat setup. It's got this just eighth note kick pattern just that plays while the bass builds, and then the melody comes back. But it does this a bunch of times. But I like how it also bookends the beginning melody.
And there aren't like a lot of extra elements here. There's not like synths, there's not a load of samples or anything like that. So all this is really being created by bass, guitar, drums, and vocals, and doing a great job at it. And I gotta say, the guitar work in here is really cool. Like, it's very riff-based, and while of course it does kind of go back and forth between, like, you know, the classic second wave black metal tropes, its willingness to explore other dynamics and other sorts of like riff structure in here is kind of refreshing. Nothing drones on entirely too long. Like, there's some moments where I think it does kind of drag a bit, but generally by the point where I was like, all right, this needs to change, it does change, or it adds a melody behind it. But even like the chord progressions are odd, like the really odd tremolo breakdown on Gidsprach V. Like, it's sinister and unsettling, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like necessarily evil. I don't know, like, black metal, I generally think of evil. This has like more of that Cascadian black metal feel, like Wolves on the Throne Room.
It's a good dynamic shift without changing the presentation. Like, especially on that song, it doesn't really wane away from using tremolo as the dominant driving force. Like, we talked about a lot of these songs having melody, but in Gidsprach V, I think that's how you say it, I don't care. In that song, tremolo is the driving force to create the atmosphere and the melody behind that. But it's how the tremolo changes from a higher register to a lower register to maybe a cleaner, more simplistic thing. It's a good dynamic shift without changing the presentation.
And I think this being like kind of outside of a lot of the second wave tropes, like, there are parts in here that, again, it feels more like, you know, like current Dark Throne. There are parts in here I would compare to maybe Alcest, maybe Death Heaven, maybe not Death Heaven. No, the best thing about Death Heaven is turning it off. I mean, for me, honestly, this band does everything that I probably would like about those two bands more if it wasn't just droned on forever. I like the fact that they like to break it up a little bit and employ some good song building dynamics. Like, I think this is like a really interesting listen, and it still does a lot of the like long sections of droning on riffs, but that sort of monotony is actually kind of cool here. As for negatives, I mean, honestly, all right, went back and listened to the self-titled just because, like, all right, I wanted to refamiliarize myself with this band. And I know the production is a little bit thin, but it does contribute to the atmosphere. It feels more lush. Like, it's not about necessarily being super heavy, but there are points where I felt like the drums kind of get lost in the mix a little bit. And maybe the guitars could have been like a little bit crunchier in spots, like especially the more punky or almost kind of thrashy sections. But outside of that, like, I can't really knock the songwriting because I think it's really, really good. So most of my issues are more production based, and yeah, it can drone on a bit in some sections, but honestly, by the time I was really catching that moment, I was like, you know what? It's already kind of shifting around.
Yeah, my gripes for this album are also in the production, but only a little bit. And my reason is this. Yes, I think the drums are a little bit thin, and yes, I think they could have tweaked the guitar tone, but it would have remained a complaint and not a praise if this album had continued on in the typical tropes of black metal. Like, if it was just blast beats and whatever, I thought, like, maybe, all right, maybe you should tweak it a little bit. But as the record goes on and it turns into like more of like a thrashy melody riff fest, it kind of makes sense that you don't want to overshadow all of what's going on by tweaking the mix in such a way that would have dampened the presentation. So my gripe in this case isn't really a gripe, it's just more of an observation. So overall, I'm going to give this record 4 stars. I got into it thinking it was going to be one thing, and it turned out to be like a musical masterpiece. Like, the songs are very well constructed. The dynamic shifts done with these melodic riffs and with these tremolos is a great thing. Like, it keeps the record entertaining, and especially when you got longer songs, to have them ebb and flow as much as they do was really cool. I just didn't see it coming. I didn't see this being as riffy and as melodically sound as it is and as entertaining as it was. So for me, it's 4 stars. It's definitely not what I thought it was going to be as far as a black metal album was concerned. It turned out to be way more. So if you like things like, I'd say Dark Throne and Mastodon, but with Baroness as the drummer, you're probably going to dig this record. Check it out.
I'm going to go with a 4 as well. And actually, having listened to this band before, this one also caught me off guard. Granted, they've always had a gift for melody. I think, melody and riffs have always been a strong point in this band, but this is notably different. I think the atmosphere being brighter, more soaring, but still kind of pivoting back and forth and flirting with the darkness. It really gives this album like almost kind of a narrative, like a story. And it flows remarkably well too, so that kind of lends itself to like a whole like narrative too. I think the songs are excellent. I think they're really well written. Occasionally some moments do drag a little bit, but again, it shifts right when it needs to, and I like this sort of post-metal sort of dynamic of building on top of riffs. Like, don't transition necessarily out of it, keep building on it. And a lot of these like Wolves in the Throne Room style melodies, except it's done more minimalistically, and I kind of appreciate that. This feels very grounded, and it still sounds like a one-man band, but it's not like the basic bedroom black metal sort of shit that generally I just am not into. There's definitely more thought in terms of songwriting on here and dynamics and transitions, and I think this is absolutely wonderful. If you like bands like, I'm going to say Wolves in the Throne Room again, I think that's a pretty good comparison, but also Spirit Possession, because this gets really riffy, definitely some Dark Throne, and kind of closer to the more recent albums, especially in the more riffy breakdowns. But I'll even say like Alcest and not so much Death Heaven. We'll just go with Alcest. But it has sort of a Black Gaze quality in some spots, and it doesn't hang out so long it becomes annoying. This is a fantastic release, and honestly, I feel like I just need to patch up the holes in my collection for this band after this one, because, this was really fucking good. So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com, which is still under construction, but that will change relatively soon. And our Patreon link is also on our channel somewhere. But we're going to make an announcement here and show off our new shirts and probably do a giveaway for one of those. So definitely stay tuned for that.
Yep, and we're promoting a show on October 1st back here in our hometown, Toledo, Ohio. Frankie's has reopened. It's our CBGBs. We've been to hundreds of shows there. Anyway, after lying dormant for 4 years, they decided to bring back metal. They tapped Thralls of Metal to help promote, which we definitely said we'd do. Because it's such a fucking awesome show, Revocation, Unearth, Entheos, and High Command. What a banger of a first metal show to bring back to the area. $25, get your ass out there if you're in this area. If you're in the tri-state area, fuck man, even if you're not from here, fly out. We're not going to pay for it, but fly out, hang out. Come see these bands, because it's the right thing to do.
And, of course, thank you all so much for liking, subscribing, following, all that shit. It means the world to us. It is amazing seeing this channel grow. All the thank you part stuff, but I mean it every time. You guys rule. And, yeah, we will be at Full Terror Assault next weekend. And if you see us, come by. Say hi. You know, let's talk fucking metal. Let's fucking enjoy some bands together.
Believe it or not, we are kind of the same people you see here on the camera, except standing right in front of you. And 30% either more funny or less funny, depending on what your definition of humor is.
Or how much beer you've had to drink.
but yeah, feel free to stop by. We are, oddly enough, kind of approachable people. Take some pictures, whatever. We're fucking down for it, because, I mean, that's just us. So,
yeah, it's a fest. Let's do some festival
let's do some fucking festing, man. Pump your fists or something.
But yeah, thank you all so much once again, and we will catch you later.